All right. Good morning, Grant. Your timing is good because I'm just starting right now. I believe that I'm taping. Yes, I am. And oops, let's make sure I'm sharing. So you should be able to see the email that I sent out this morning. As mentioned here, today we're going to continue on with Bootstrap, the Bootstrap portion of the class. I decided at about 7 o'clock this morning to do something which was kind of foolish, and that was to do some rewrite of the site that I've been working on. And I got it about half done, but that's still okay because we're going to get a lot of stuff done today. And I'd still like to be done somewhere between 10 and 10:30. Tomorrow we'll finish this up. We'll take this site and I will show you how to save it to GitHub Pages. All right. And then Thursday and Friday, what I'm going to do is it seems like no matter how much time I try to give for labs, it doesn't seem to be enough time. So what I'm going to do is either tomorrow afternoon or Thursday morning, I'm going to give you what will be considered to be the test for Bootstrap. And it'll basically be for you to create a site using Bootstrap. All right. And you will have, I'm going to give you about a week to work on it. So even though I'll give it to you Thursday, it'll be due like midnight the following Wednesday. Thursday will be lab for the entire period. Friday will be lab for the entire period. Then starting next week, we're going to go into the JavaScript book. So that's the plan, just so you've got an idea of what's going on in here. All right. If you have not turned in yet your chapters 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15 material, it is due tonight by midnight. All right. Now, for various reasons, no excuses, but I'm behind on my grading. I will tell you, I will promise you this, that by Monday of next week, which is whatever, the 6th or something like that, by Monday, I will have everything graded, all right, that has been turned into me. Okay. All right. So with that said, one thing I did today, I said here, some associated Bootstrap PowerPoints are attached to this email. Now, it's kind of interesting. And what I mean here is the class that I'm teaching in the afternoon, AWD1115, it's database-driven website development 2. I'm teaching it. It's a class in ASP.NET where you basically learn to write websites using C#. That's not all of it, but that's kind of it in a nutshell. The reason I'm telling you this is that Mr. Gudmested is also teaching it in the seated section in the afternoon at the St. Louis campus. All right. And we've got kind of a little bit different approach to this. He is relying heavily on the PowerPoints that come with the textbook we're using. I typically don't like to go over PowerPoints and spend a lot of time on them. All right. First of all, I find it a little bit demeaning to sit there and read PowerPoints to people when they can read them themselves. All right. And I don't mean that Mr. Gudmeston does that. I'm not, and again, I'm not slamming him a bit for doing it the way he's doing it. I just have been to enough meetings in my life where I have sat there for a couple hours and watched as the presenter has read PowerPoints word for word. All right. So what I'm telling you is there's about 6 or 7 sets of PowerPoints here. The first one's pretty long. There's about 40 slides. Some of them are only 10 slides or so. But what I'd like to do between now and probably the time we break is to go over these. Again, please believe me, I'm not going to read them to you, but I think there's material that's in here that's important enough for us to go through. So for hopefully the one and only time this semester, we're going to actually go through some PowerPoint slides. All right, the first one they set is an introduction to Bootstrap. You already know this. This is pretty much the what you get when you go to getbootstrap.com. Now, I should mention here that these slides were created about a year and a half to 2 years ago. So some of the screens may look a little bit different now, but the material is totally relevant. All right. Little history of Bootstrap. Already mentioned it was originally called Twitter Bootstrap. If you want more, you can go there and take a look. These, I believe, are the two gentlemen who created, all right, Bootstrap. It's kind of funny. Whenever they show people to me, they always look like they're wound a little bit differently, but whatever. All right. The key benefit, it's the middle one. It's the mobile first responsive design. Even more than that, it's the fact that it is responsive out of the box. All right. Plus, as you've already started to learn, it is totally possible, it is totally legit to go in and incorporate Flexbox, CSS Grid, media queries, all of that stuff, you can bring in fairly simplistically into Bootstrap itself. All right. This JS Deliver, the only thing I would say about this is, again, when we're going to look at this in just a little bit, where you can go out and get the files. Now, remember, when you do this, as it says here, and these might be a little bit old, but don't worry about it. They both say CDN, though. So as we've spoken about before, all right, that means that's a content delivery network. What that means is rather than you housing those files, the system goes and basically is linking out to these files out on the internet, which, as I mentioned to you earlier, means that it's a requirement that you have an internet connection to be able to use these. All right, if you don't, I mean, the stuff that you're asking for in here just won't work. All right, there's a lot of different ways that you can bring this stuff in. We talked a little bit about this yesterday. If you use the compiled CSS and JS, which of course you'd be welcome to do, you can't make changes to it. If it's compiled, all right, that means that as it says, you can put it into your project, but you can't modify it. You've got virtually the executables. All right. I mentioned this to you yesterday that there's bootswatch.com. Guess what? There are other places that you can go out and get free themes for Bootstrap. All right. There's also places you can go out and get themes for Bootstrap for which you pay. Anywhere, believe it or not, from 99 cents to hundreds of dollars. I'm not ever suggesting that you go out and spend any money on anything for this class. All right. Now, notice what it says here. It says for improved cross-rendering browsing, we use Reboot. What does that mean? Well, as it says there, it builds upon, so it's kind of a, for lack of better words, it's kind of the normalized.css on steroids. And even says you don't need to include it. With Bootstrap, it's built in for you. Just another thing. So installing Bootstrap from a CDN, again, we already talked about this. All right. Now, what I'm going to do in the example today is I'm going to bring in that style sheet, and I'm going to bring in that, so the bootstrap.min.css and the bundle.min.js. I'm going to put both of them in the header section. In addition, if you want to go in and use the Bootstrap icons, which we're going to use, you also need to bring in another CDN. We'll talk about all those in just a bit. All right. We talked yesterday about breakpoints. Again, I don't want to sit and read to you. The good news is these are considered standard breakpoint sizes. All right. So really, I mean, let's just put this into perspective. Anything between 576 and 768 pixels are typically going to work on a phone. Anything between 768 and 992 pixels are going to typically work on a tablet. 992 to 1200 works best probably on a laptop, all right, on a desktop as well, all right. And some of the desktops today, and I'm sure you've seen them, you can get desktops today with 24-inch monitors, 36-inch monitors, etc. And that's where you'd use probably the XL stuff. You'll notice there's even an XXL. And as I mentioned to you, all right, I mentioned this yesterday, when you use that stuff that's over 1200, usually at least, All right. That's going to be either for a really large desktop monitor or if you're putting something like on a projector unit or something like that. All right. Again, these are all things that we talked a little bit about yesterday. Hopefully by now you remember the differences between margin and padding. All right. Margin, basically, for lack of better words, if you've got two elements on a page, margin is the difference between the two elements. All right. And padding is the distance around the element itself. So you've got the content, and around the content is the padding, and then around the padding is the border, and then around the border is the margin. And we've talked about this before. All right. If you want there to be no margin and no padding, you can set M0 and P0. All right. And as the numbers go up, the amount of margin or the amount of padding gets bigger. In addition, all right, you can say either ME or PE, which is margin end or padding end, which is basically adding padding to the right. You can say MS or PS, which is margin or padding start, which will give it to you from the left. You can also use MX or PX to get padding on the X-axis, all right, or MY or PY to get padding on the Y-axis. And what those mean, just so you know too, is on the X-axis, that's going to be you get the same amount on the left and on the right. And for the y-axis, it means you're going to get padding on the top and on the bottom. All right. And again, if you want more, you can go out here and take a look at the associated URLs. All right. So again, this is just more of what I just mentioned to you. All right. One of the things that has always been a little bit difficult when you're working with things is to get them centered. And to get them centered, right in the middle of wherever it is you want to put something. As it says, Bootstrap has an MX Auto class, and MX Auto horizontally centers things for you. All right. And it's just kind of nice, just again, because there's not all that much you have to do to get this thing centered. And there's more here on spacing if you're interested in that. The viewport, we've already mentioned this. Now, I do want you to start understanding what this kind of stuff means. All right. What this means is right here, margin 0, M0, MG large 3. What the heck does that mean? That means that the margin is automatically set to 0 until you get to a large breakpoint, which is right here at 992. Then, all right, then you want basically a margin of 3. All right. So as it says, this right here, no margins for either extra small, small, medium screens. You'd have no margins. But for LG3, that means that for large, and extra, extra large, you'd have a margin of 3. And the same kind of thing works right here. This can really confuse people because you can sit there and you can put all sorts of different designations in there. And what I mean is margin, padding, the size of something that you want to make. All right, you could, if you wanted to, I don't know why you'd ever want to do something like this, but you could even have different colored fonts for different screen sizes if for some reason you wanted to do that. All right. Sizing, you're going to see a little bit of this a little bit later today, but a lot of times, as an example, you might end up using things like this. All right. For images, if you've got an image, once you put it on a screen, it's too large and you only want it to appear at 50% of its size, you can use the W/50. All right. And you can see the other stuff that's in here as well. But again, if you want more, you can go down to here and find out a little bit more about this. All right. The VW and the VH, we've talked about these already. All right. The viewport width and the viewport height. We've used the viewport height a couple times this semester. if we wanted a page, if you remember back when we were talking Flexbox, and I made that page on the AWD program for you. All right. I set the view height to 100 VH. All right. You can do the same kind of thing with the width. All right. Colors. Now, one thing about this, when I talked about colors, I talked about them in the guise of using them for buttons, but you can have colors for anything. All right. So if I want a certain section to have red text, I can basically set that, like if it was a paragraph, I could give it a class of text hyphen danger. All right. If I wanted the warning, as you see right there. Okay. Now it says important, the color palette is defined by the theme. It's typically going to be set up like this. All right. And notice the light and the white, because most people look at these and they, well, that's the same thing. Not technically. All right. They're very similar to one another, but the white is a little bleached out, or the light rather is a little bleached out from the white. And again, what you're going to find in the examples that we're going to go through in a little bit, because as I mentioned to you, and I'm not putting anything past you, I did these things that I did based off of the Bootstrap 5 crash course by Brad Traversy. All right. And most of my stuff is just dark or light, but you could go in and change any of that. You could change backgrounds to blue. You could change button colors to green, etc. if you wanted to do so. All right. So here it is with background color. You can do the same thing and make everything a certain color and then give it a border color. All right. The text alignment. Okay. Now notice what it says here. It says if you use text start, it's the same thing as though you did a text align left. Text center is a text align center, and text end is a text align right. The reason I wanted to take a second to bring that up is there is nothing that prohibits you from going in and using these inside of your CSS file. But why would you do that when you're given these things here inside of Bootstrap itself? All right. The transform stuff, if you've never seen that, sometimes what people will do is they'll take the first paragraph of a website, and they will take the first paragraph and they'll actually make it uppercase just so it stands out a little bit. All right. And one way you can do that is with the text uppercase. What that will do is if, for example, if I were to come in here and set a paragraph to text uppercase, and this was the paragraph down here, then every letter in there would be uppercase. All right. And you'll notice there's a capitalized, which is pretty much a title case as well. All right. The font weight, we've talked about this a little bit. So FW bold is basically, all right, like a font weight bold, or it's basically like using a strong tag. All right. Notice there's bold and there's bolder, and there's normal, which of course would be the default. And then notice that when you go over to italic, it's not FW anymore. It's not a font weight. It's FST, which is a font style. All right. So that FST italic is like font style italic, which is like if you were to use no CSS, it's like using an M tag, EM tag in HTML. All right. We've talked a little bit about Flexbox. We had a whole chapter on it. But again, you can use much of the Flexbox stuff inherently right inside of Bootstrap. I'm not going to read any of these to you, but you can see how they're used in Bootstrap, and then the equivalent of if you put them in the CSS file yourselves. All right. Says there you can use breakpoints to change how the display property works depending on the width of your viewport. Yeah, the best way to learn this stuff is to literally just go and create yourself a page and start playing with it. all right? Or even better, get it to the way you want it to look, then take the whole folder you're working with and make a copy and start changing all over the place on the copy. I may have told you about this before. I don't remember if I have or not, but I'll always remember this. It sounds so basic. When I took my first programming class, it was in a language that's not used very much anymore called COBOL, which stands for Common Business Oriented Language. And I got the first program done fairly quickly, and it was correct. We were given inputs. At that time, what happened was we were all hooked up to a mainframe computer, and you could only have a certain number of program runs. So, in other words, if you had more than 5 program runs, all right, you lost a grade for every program run you went over 5. All right. Well, bottom line is this: I got my program to work, but I didn't like the way that it looked. So I talked to the instructor and I said exactly what I just told you. I said, "Can I change it around?" And he goes, "Go ahead, but work with a copy." And I was really glad I did because I ended up screwing it up. I eventually fixed it to the way I wanted it, but what I turned in was the copy he wanted, was the same kind of thing everybody else in the class did. All right. So again, Flexbox direction, these are all Flexbox commands you've learned over here. And this is how you incorporate the same things in Bootstrap. When you take your test on this, when I pass this out, either tomorrow or Thursday morning, there's not going to be anything like that in there where you have to do a Flexbox with this or with that. It'll be more generic in nature. All right, we'll talk about it at that time. All right, again, justify content, align items, align self, grow and shrink, and ordering all the stuff that we've talked about, all the stuff that we've talked about back in chapter 9, I think it was. You can incorporate all of that stuff right inside of Bootstrap. All right. So this is what was covered in there. And again, I'm not trying to waste my time. I'm not trying to waste your time with this. But for completeness, I am taking a couple minutes, all right, out of this class to go through some of these. All right. Now here, this one's got only 9 slides in it, but it talks about, again, the grid system. The idea is when we go this or after we go through this, you have an understanding of what this stuff is about. By no means would I expect you to be able to start tomorrow as a developer, creating brand new, really elaborate websites using Bootstrap. The idea is you've been introduced to Bootstrap. This is probably something that you're going to want to put some kind of a Bootstrap project you'll want to put into your electronic portfolio. And even though I'm going to create my electronic portfolio in a few minutes in Bootstrap, I'm not saying you have to do that. All right, because you don't. You are welcome to, but you don't have to. All right. So containers are kind of, as it says, it's the basic layout element. It's sort of the heart and the soul because almost everything that you create is inside of a container. All right. And take a look, if you would, at that last bullet point. You should never, ever nest containers. What does that mean? It means you should never put a container inside of a container. Just weird things can happen when you do that. All right, or unpredictable things. All right, I'm not going to read a bit of this. We've already talked about these. I do want you to understand, though, if you look up at the top of the screen, the difference between container and container fluid. All right, it says their container sets a max width at each responsive breakpoint, and a container fluid is 100% at all breakpoints. So fluid means take up all the screen whenever possible. In other words, don't have any margin over here or over here. So a straight container will automatically put some margin in, whereas a straight container fluid will not. All right. We talked yesterday about the grid system and talked about the fact that it's based on 12 columns. So here are some examples. Now, what you see on here, I want you to understand this. All right. And that is everything that's in here, for lack of better wordage, is pretty symmetrical. 2, 6 each, 3, 4 each, 4, 3 each, 6, 2 each, 12, 1 each. You don't have to do that. For instance, in here, this one could have been 8, this one could have been 2, and then 1, and then 1. You can set these up any way you have to or need to set them up. It is by no means mandatory that you set it up so it looks like, like one of these. All right, and here's some great examples. I'm not going to go over those with you. All right, you should be able to tell with a 4 and an 8, this would be double the size of this. Now you'll notice that there is nothing in here that talks about small or medium or whatever. So what the system is going to always try to do, since we didn't put any kind of modifiers or things in there with our col, it's going to try to always put these 12 columns in the same row. It's not going to stack them. All right. When you want to start stacking them, you use these predefined breakpoints. All right. And here is an example. So notice we've got an MD4 here. All right. And what that means is once you reach a medium-sized screen, and remember, a medium is 768 pixels or above. All right. Then we want this to be all in one row. But until we reach that 768, so anywhere between 0 and 776 pixels, we want you to stack like this. All right. And there's another example here. The reason that I showed these, first of all, I forgot I had them, and I don't even know who made these. I'm going to give Mr. Smith credit and say he probably did. It's not impossible that I made them, but I don't think that I did. All right, I think he did. But again, if you start to look at this, you'll notice here, medium says 4. So when you're 0 again to 767, it's going to stack. All right. When you get up to XL, which is here, so when you're 768 to 1199, all right, when you're there, you're going to have 2 across. All right. And after that, basically it's going to be, I'm sorry, whatever it says, when you get to here. All right. But just start taking a look at that. All right. And again, go out to here. They've got plenty of examples out here at the getbootstrap.com layout grid. All right. All righty. Here's number 3. Again, this is fairly short, and it's on cards. Want to go over this one because we are going to use cards in the example we're going to begin in just a bit. All right. Now it says there a card is used to represent items in a list or array. If you don't know what an array is, don't worry about it. All right. But for instance, I had originally used cards where I had my list of the classes that I teach. I changed that around a little bit this morning, and I added 3 cards. All right. And I have one card now that's going to be for HTML, one card that's going to be for CSS, and one card that's going to be for JavaScript. I could go in and add yet another card for Bootstrap, for example, or I could go back to the way I had it originally, where I had 4 cards, one for each course that's in the AWD program. And they give you some more examples here. All right. The idea here, if you've never heard that word before, if you look at the first bullet point, it says cards are extensible, which means it's really easy to do different things with them. Kind of like they're silly putty, or they're something you can stretch and do different things with. And what you do with a card is up to you because there's several different card formats that you'd see if you go and bring up right here, if you go to the URL that's there. All right. Cards can be as simple or as ornate as you want them or need them to be. What you will typically find is that when people put a set of cards together, there is some commonality between them. All right, as far as the look and feel. It's by no means mandatory that you do that, but it's just a thing that people seem to do. All right. And as it says, they have a wide variety of display options. Now, typically, by default, cards will have, as it says there, a class of card, then they'll have a body, all right, and then they'll have card text. Now, there can be more than that as well. All right, so there's a card with a title and a subtitle. All right, so there's that one's here, the title and the subtitle, etc. You can also go in and, as it says, this can be a header, this can be an image, this can be whatever it is you want it or need it to be. All right, so as I said, these cards can be as simple as you want or as complex or ornate as you want. Here we're adding a button. All right. You can align them in different ways. There's really, you can use different colors. Now, some people like to do this. I guess I'm boring. All right. And I like to do it more where there's a common look and feel to them. And the reason I'm telling you that is what you're going to see in just a few minutes. As I said, I've started to redo this thing and it's not perfect. But when you look in here, I've got all these looking the same. All right. And you'll notice that this is responsive. All right. And as you pull it out, the picture isn't showing till you get to a certain point where I believe it's at small, and then it'll get bigger as you go on and bigger and bigger. And oh my gosh, that guy's scary. But you can see what's in here. I've actually put links in here. I played with a background color in here and in here and in here. We'll look at that and then we'll get to the accordions. We'll get to all this stuff. All right. So again, image on top, image on the bottom, etc. Image left or right. All right. And again, this is the place to go. All right. Part of what you're going to be graded on for this test is, I wouldn't say creativity, but I don't know what you want to call it, author expression or something like that. So when you create a website, it'll be on how nice it flows, how nice it looks. And it ideally, at least, it's going to look at least somewhat professional. All right. Okay. Let's jump on to the next one here. It's actually the last one. All right. Nav bar. We've been working with nav bars. I'm going to build the nav bar with you in just a couple minutes, and I'm going to build it very slowly on purpose. All right. We're going to go through all of this stuff and what it means. All right. Notice nav bars require a nav bar element. All right. With an expand in there, we're going to go through all that we did yesterday. We're going to do it again. It says that they're fluid by default. You can almost look at the word fluid as being greedy. And what I mean is, something that's fluid is going to take up all the room it possibly can. Nav bars, and you saw this yesterday, can be responsive or they can be static. So we can set them up so they're always there and always the same size, but you typically don't want to do that. Again, you typically, want to use the hamburger menu or something like that if you're on a phone. All right. So here's an example. We've talked about this kind of thing before. This again is typically referred to as the brand. It can be words, It can be an image. It can be a combination of words and an image. You'll notice in here, we've got navbar expand, navbar dark, background dark. All right. And that's done all of this stuff in here. Okay. All right. Responsive one. So in here, and again, you're going to see this in just a couple minutes. We're going to build this and we will have it set up so it'll automatically come in here then and put in this hamburger menu that you see right here. What you'll notice is, especially if you include everything in here, notice how many classes they've used. All right. Part of really being able to work with Bootstrap and to be able to be successful with Bootstrap, all right, is not memorizing this stuff, but knowing where to go into the documentation to find a good example. All right. So again, there is a logo along with a company name. All right. And as we mentioned, there's a lot of different ways you can do it. If you set the nav bar to light, all right, background light, it'll look like this. There it is, dark. Okay. You can set it up to any of those colors that we've looked at. So primary, secondary, success, warning, danger, etc. You can make all of them basically any kind of color you want. And again, as mentioned, there's more examples right out here. All right. The Jumbotron, had my own foibles yesterday working with a Jumbotron, but let's take a quick look at that. And again, there's 10 slides in here. This isn't going to take very much time. We're going to start on actually creating our electronic portfolio before we start on the break today, or before we take the break. So, all right. Jumbotrons, I think I mentioned this before, they're not at all mandatory. Not only that, if you remember yesterday when I was going through this stuff and I gave you some examples, and it looked pretty clunky, but we had a Jumbotron and then underneath that we had a slideshow, etc. You can put a slideshow inside of a Jumbotron. You could put anything in a Jumbotron that you want. All right. And you've got total control over the background color of the Jumbotron, of the text color of the Jumbotron, if you're going to put in a button on the button color of the Jumbotron, etc. All right. We mentioned this idea about above the fold before. You can read that yourselves. But the bottom line is you want to typically put your most important near the top of the page. So the reason that you may decide that you want a Jumbotron is in here, you want to do something that's going to catch the user's attention. All right. And just a little bit more with above the fold right here. You can read that on your own if you're interested. All right. And this is why they're telling you to do this, to get the user's attention, pique their interest, etc. The bottom line is this. All right. And I've mentioned this kind of thing to you before, and that is if you got a service you're trying to have people utilize or a product that you want people to buy, the chances are really, really, really good there's some other company that offers the same service or offers the same product. So the reason that you might decide to go in and have a Jumbotron is to try to get users' attention. All right, make them want to stay and use your site as opposed to somebody else's. So again, there's an example, and there's so again, if you look on here, notice div class equal container. All right, and you've got a little bit here on the white. All right, you've got a little bit of margin or padding there, but when you do the somewhere in here, there'd be a fluid in here. All right, and that's going to use up everything. And again, notice the example. Here's one with an image. You can make these, as I mentioned, as simple or as complex as you want to or need to. All right. sometimes it's worth your while when you look right here at this last slide, because we're done with this part. But notice this is the same URL, except one is 5.0 and one is 4.5. Sometimes it may be worth your while to look even at earlier versions of the documentation. All right. Sometimes you'll find better examples in some of the earlier versions. All right. So we've got a couple left here, and we've got forms and we've got buttons. Let's do buttons next. Again, only 8 slides, so just take us a minute or two to get through this. Okay. And you can do all sorts of things with buttons. We've talked about this before. Mentioned yesterday how you could even take a hyperlink and make it look like a button. All right. So there's examples, as it says there, of unstyled links and buttons. What does that mean? Well, that's the way a hyperlink's going to look by default. You've already seen this kind of thing. That's the way a blah kind of looking button is going to look by default. But as mentioned yesterday, you can use any of these 8 or whatever it is, 8 or 9 different colors in here, all right, to do whatever it is you want to do. And if you look again at the last one, there's a button that looks like a link if you want to do that. All right. And we mentioned yesterday also about the outline in here. So again, with that, if I put my mouse on it, this is a picture, so it won't work. But if I put my mouse right on it right there, it'll look like this, for example. The sizes we mentioned yesterday, all right? If you say BTN and you don't say BTN-LG or BTL or BTN-SM, it just becomes a regular button. And you can see the size and the difference between these. All right. And then finally, let's finish it up with forms. Right? And as it says right there in the second and third bullet, add the class of form control to any text control element, like an input when type is text, an input when type is email, and input when type is, number, etc. And text areas, add the class of form label to label elements. By default, when you set this stuff up, all right, I don't know if they show it here or not, it's going to look like this. In other words, by default, the label will be above the text box or the text area. You can change that. Also notice what it says here in the last bullet. Bootstrap form validation is very useful. So there's, again, some extra validation that you can put in addition to the, quote, regular HTML validation, unquote. All right. We've talked a bit about accessibility, and I mentioned that virtually every time you come in here and you see something with ARIA, all right, that is basically something to help people who are sight or hearing or impaired or have some other kind of an impairment. There are all sorts of different kinds of impairments too. I mean, there are people who have an aversion to colors. I don't even mean that they're color blind, all right? But they can't take certain colors. There are people you already know that are sight impaired, that are hearing impaired. There are people that for whatever reason cannot use a mouse. So there's all sorts of different things in here. All right. Notice as it says that you can set sizes for this stuff, and there's different ways that you can do this. By default, again, these things are fairly greedy. So they're going to take up about as much area as they can, all right, as far as the width of what your screen looks like. Okay. All right. There is a select. Again, that's pretty much the drop down. We've used something like that before when we've set up our list of states, but you can do that in here as well. And it's very, very, very similar when you look in here to the way we did set it up in straight HTML. All right, check boxes, you know what those are as well. Radio buttons, you know what those are as well. All right, there's something in here called a switch. Now, switches are available in a lot of different programming languages. All right. And a lot of times you'll see different, types of switches if you've ever done something where you're signing up for something or whatever. All right. Basically, it's something really simple. It's a toggle, meaning that if you move it to the right, it's considered on. If you move it to the left, it's considered off. All right. And they talk in here about layouts and different things that you can do with layouts. All right. And like in here, sure isn't mandatory that you have labels. There are no labels here, but notice now they've got placeholders. All right. We talked about this in our days of straight HTML. All right. And again, there's a lot of different stuff that you can do in here. And just finish it up with the validation. Right. As it says here, HTML form validation is applied via the CSS pseudo classes. Notice it says you'll need to add JavaScript for disabling form submissions if there are valid fields. What does that mean? That means that by default, when you click a submit button and everything is okay, the system by default wants to go someplace. If you want to keep that from happening, and you're going to learn more about this in JavaScript, all right, but in here to do that, as it says, you'll need to add the JavaScript, which we'll be doing anyway. For custom Bootstrap messages, it says you'll add the no validate Boolean attribute. Okay, that's not that big a thing for what we've been doing with this. Now, here is an example of some required JavaScript. I'm not going to go over a bit of this, but I will tell you that by the end of the semester, hopefully, virtually everything that you see in here will make sense to you. All right. Well, he must have had a demo, but I don't know what he did with it. So that's it. All right. So with all of that stuff said, okay, again, I'm trying to be totally transparent here in telling you that what I did was this is what I'm going to start building for you right now. Okay. And with what I did, I went out and I went out to YouTube. And again, I put in here Brad Traversy Bootstrap 5 crash course. It's about an hour and 20 minutes long. And I went through that, grabbed most of the stuff that he had and made my own changes to it. So it gave me what I wanted to have. All right, let's at least start on this right now. So you're welcome to code along with me. You don't have to. When I get done, all right, when I get done, I will take and put out what I've done. I will put it out as a GitHub repository. All right. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create a new folder. And I'm going to call that new folder E-portfolio. Why? Because that's what I'm going to put in here. Okay, so there's my e-portfolio. Right now, as you can see, of course, there's nothing in it. So I'm going to immediately open this up. And I've got a lot of stuff open here, so I'm going to close this one. I'll leave that one open for now. But I'm going to open this one up inside of Visual Studio Code. All right, and as we oftentimes do, I'm going to come in here and do three things to begin with. The first is I'm going to click New File, and I'll put in here my index.html, and then I will hit my exclamation point and hit Tab. We'll come back to that file in a minute. Then I will come in and add a new folder that we'll call CSS. And inside of here, I will create a new file that will be called styles.css. Okay. All right. So let's go back to here and let's close this part. We don't need this. And let's, just in case we need it, let's turn on word wrap. All right. So right now, this course, this isn't going to do much. I'm going to put in here, change the title to e-portfolio. All right. But what I want to do is I want to bring three things in here. I want to bring in the Bootstrap CSS file. I want to bring in the Bootstrap JS file, and I want to bring in the Bootstrap that I'll need to be able to use the icons. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come out here and I'm going to go to getbootstrap.com. All right. And I'm going to go to the docs and I'm going to go down. Now I could have done the quick start from here and just grab this. This is pretty much what we created anyway. All right. Or I could have grabbed this, which has got both of them in there. We could have done that just as easily. All right. But I'm going to go to these CDN links right here, which is about between a third and half the way down. And I'm going to grab first this CDN link, the one right here. I'm going to copy that to the clipboard. And then I'm going to go back here and I'm going to put in link and hit tab. All right, that's Emmett working. And now I'm going to paste that in. So now I have in here my bootstrap.min.css file. All right. Then I'm going to come in and underneath that, I'm going to put in a script with the word defer. All right. And then I'm going to say source equals. And now I'm going to try to find the other one. All right. Meaning I'm going to go back again to where I just was. And I'm going to grab this. I'm again going to copy this to the clipboard. All right. And now I'm going to come in here, paste that in, and close my tag, which will put in the ending script tag for me. So I now have available to me right now the latest and greatest, meaning Bootstrap 5.3 of the Bootstrap min.css and the Bootstrap 5.3 of the Bootstrap bundle.min.js. And the bundle just means I believe that it has the popper in there if we need that as well. All right. I'm going to put in one more file right now. So I'm going to go down and in between these two. I'm just going to hit enter and I'm going to put in another link right here. All right. And I'm going to search for this because it's not real apparent where it is. So I'm going to put in here Bootstrap 5 icons CDN. All right. And I don't remember where it is. So I think it's on this one right here, the bootstrapcdn.com bootstrap icons. Yeah, it's right here. I was having all sorts of problems trying to copy this by clicking the copy button. So I'm just going to grab everything that you see right here, and I'm going to copy that to the clipboard. And then I'm going to come back to here, and I'm going to paste that in, or at least attempt. There we go. So what I have in here right now, all right, I've come in and I have brought into my program right now, I have brought in the Bootstrap CSS, the Bootstrap icon CSS, and the Bootstrap JS bundle. Nothing else. Now, I haven't put anything into the body yet. We'll start to do that after the break. All right. It is 9 o'clock right now, or just about 9 o'clock. There it is, 9 o'clock. Let's take a nice break here. Let's take 15 minutes and we'll come back and I'll go till at least 10 o'clock or so for our next break. So let's please come back at 9:15. All right, it is 9:15, so I'm going to start back up again. And so far, again, we've come in here and we just built our typical template, and then we added the Bootstrap min CSS, the Bootstrap icon CSS, and the Bootstrap bundle CSS. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to come in here, we're going to create the nav bar section. All right, and let's put in, let's at least delimit it with a comment or two. So I'm going to put in here what it is, nav bar section, start. And then underneath that, I'll put in another comment, and it will be navbar end. All right. And in between here, as you'd guess, I'm going to put in the navbar. So again, I'm going to take this very meticulously. And what I mean is just a little bit at a time so we can see everything that's going on. Now, I can run this program right now. And of course, you should all know this. It will actually show the tab that'll be up on the top will say ePortfolio, but it'll just be an empty page. We can do that, but I don't know exactly what that's going to show. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add my nav bar. So I'm going to say nav class equals nav bar. And I'm going to say nav bar expand large. And I'm going to have a background that's going to be dark. And I'm going to say nav bar dark. And I'm going to put in some padding here. And that's all I'm going to do. Whoops, and I've got to always screw this up. So let's think about what this has done so far. We will actually take a look at it in a second. All right. So what's in here right now is it should be a nav bar. It should stretch the entire way across the screen. And that should say dark, not darred. I don't know what that is. It should be dark in color. And it should have padding above it and padding below it. Now, it's just going to be like a black, kind of like a big chunky black line that's in there. But I should be able to run this. And there it is. All right. Now, even though I put padding Y3, since there's no text in there yet, it doesn't really show a heck of a lot. All right. So let's go in there and add some text. Okay. So let me do this. Let me hit enter here. There we go. And then the first thing I want to do is, you may or may not have noticed, but when we brought this up, it literally stretched all the way across, and it will. But right now, if we went in and put some text in, it would be pushed way up against the left here. We don't want that. So as you heard today, you oftentimes come in here and we put in a div with a class that's equal to container. And virtually everything that we're going to do right now, we're going to put inside of here. All right. And in fact, really, the entire nav bar is going to go inside of this container. All right. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to come in here and we're going to put in our brand. I don't want it to go anywhere. In fact, when I click on it, I really want it to go right to where it is. So I'm going to just put in that. I'm going to say class equals navbar brand. And then in here, I'm just going to put in JP Scott. All right, that's going to be my brand. In fact, I won't even put a space in there, just like that. All right. Now, again, as we've already talked about, we could put in an image, all right, which would be fairly small, but we could put an image in there. We can put in an image and text, or as I'm doing in here, just text. All right. So when I come in here and I again do a save all, and I come in and open this, there you can see it. And since it's a container, again, it was pushed over. All right. Now I don't have anything else here, and we're going to add the rest of the stuff right now. And like I said, I'm building it the way I'm building it on purpose for a reason. All right. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create our menu. So for right now, we're not going to worry about, I mean, when we run this like this and we make it smaller, all right, so when we start to make it smaller, we're not going to have the hamburger menu yet. We'll build that afterwards. So it's going to look pretty much like this, and that's okay. All right. So I want to think about what I actually want to have in here. All right. And basically, what I'm going to want to have in here is an about. Um, let's see. I'm going to have about 4 or 5 sections in here. I'm going to have an about. And under that, I'm going to have some information about the AWD1000 class. Then under that, I'm going to have something that's going to say, why me? And that's going to put in the accordion. And then I'm going to have the portfolio probably, and then contacts. So I'm going to have 5 things in here. Okay. So again, I'm still inside of this div. I'm going to hit enter a couple times because in here in just a minute, all right, I can put a comment in here that says it too. But in here, what I'm going to put in here in just a second will be the hamburger menu. All right, but I'll put that in just a bit. But before I do that, I'm going to come in and create my navigation menu. All right, so I'm going to say here div class equals collapse navbar dash collapse. And I want to give it, I want to give it an ID. Now we can call it anything we want, but since it's a navigation menu, I'm going to call it nav menu. Again, if you don't like that name, you could, of course, call it anything that you want to call it. All right. And this is going to be important, this name, because we are going to need to associate that name up here when we add the hamburger menu. You'll see that in just a moment. All right. Now, I'm going to come in and put in an unordered list here. The class is going to be equal to navbar dash nav, just like that. Okay. And inside of here, I'm going to have my 5 list items. So here's the first one, li class equals nav dash item. All right. And inside of here, I'm going to have a hyperlink. And this will be for my about. All right. This is all going to be on one page. So class is going to be equal to nav dash link. And it will be about. All right. So right now, if I go and save this and I take a look at it, there it is. There's that, and there's the about. Now I could style this if I wanted to. One thing I don't like is I want this to be moved over to the right-hand side. So I don't want that to be here. I want it to be over to here. All right. And it's very simple to do. And that is where I've got my UL here. Right now it says UL equal class nav bar nav. I'm going to add another class to it. So I can say MS auto, margin start auto. And when I save that and I come back and bring it up, now you can see that the about is moved over to here. All right. That's good. That's what I wanted. Now I said I'm going to have 5 things here. And what I'm going to do for now is I'm just going to copy this. Now, right now, of course, that's stupid. I mean, if I save this and bring it up, I'm going to have the word about in there 5 times. But you can see that it is working. That's good news. All right. So I've got my brand and I'm getting my navigation bar stuff in here. All right. So let's see, what else do we need in here? Well, again, that about is okay. All right, because that'll be information about me. Then the next section that's going to be after the about is going to be about the AWD1000 class. So I'm going to call that what it is. I'm going to call that AWD1100, and I'm going to call this AWD1100 as well. Again, if you're doing yours, if you are following along with me, put anything you want in there. All right. I'm just showing you a way of doing it. I'm not saying it's the way. I don't know if there is a the way of doing it. All right. So we'll have an about section, then we'll have that. Then next, I'm going to have an accordion, and it's going to be, I'm going to call it why me. And if you don't know why that is, you will in just a bit. So again, that'll be why me. All right. And then underneath that, I'm going to have some portfolio information. And then finally at the bottom, I'm going to have contact. So if I have done this right, I now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different links. I put a question mark in there. I don't have to. All right. You can see what they should be called. And you can see that I have associated an ID with each one of those. So hopefully we're going to be able to jump to them. So I've got about AWD 1100, why me, portfolio, and contact. So let's save this, right, and take a look at what we have. And there they are. So there's about AWD 1100, why me, portfolio, and contact. All right. So let's come in now and let's add that hamburger because again, as we've already mentioned, when you get down to a certain point, it's just not going to show it. All right. And when you widen it out to a certain point, it will show it. All right. So let's go back and let's come back up here and where I put in hamburger menu, let's put it in. All right. And the way we do that is we come in here with a button. We say class equals navbar toggler. All right. Type equal button. And then we have to basically tell what we want to have happen with that. We want it to collapse. So data BS for Bootstrap, BS toggle equal collapse. All right. Then we have to set up our target. And again, it has to have that name right there. So we're going to say target. I'm sorry, a little more data.bs.target and that's equal to # because it's the ID of nav menu that we just put in. All right. So there's the beginning of our button. All right. And then we come in here and we say span class equals navbar toggler icon. All right. Hopefully that's it. Let's take a quick look. So file, save all. And now we've got this, and oh, but I've lost my writing here, but there that is. So I'm missing something. We'll look in just a minute. And the stuff is here, so I'm missing something, but we're going to grab it in just a second. Okay. But it is giving me that hamburger menu. So let's take a look at what I screwed up on. All right. We'll fix it. It'll take just a moment to fix it, I think. All right. So taking from the top. Navbar, class equal navbar expand, arch, BG dark, navbar dark, PY3, that looks good. Div class is container, that's good. href is that. And usually when I do something like this, I probably have left off a double quote. That's okay. It did not end my span. No. All right. So let's see what that did. All right, my words are back. There's the hamburger menu, and there's all the other stuff. So again, when it hits a certain breakpoint, it's going to show that, and then it's going to break down here to the hamburger menu, which again, you can turn on and turn off. Now, if I want to, I can come in here, change the color of these. All right. That's something you may want to consider doing inside of your regular CSS. I don't know.
I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
So we were talking about, I remember on the PowerPoint about setting the breakpoints for the nav menus and the different settings, but I don't see, at least right now, where we did that here. Is this just the default breakpoint with Bootstrap?
Yes and no. I mean, that's a good question. So let's take a look at the code. All right. What this is saying here is, yeah, it is built in that it's saying when it gets to a certain point, it wants to collapse and it wants to show this.
Okay.
And
that's probably
I believe by default, it's when it reaches the small size.
Okay, gotcha.
All right. And most of the stuff we do, because that's a great question, it really is. Most of the stuff that we do, we are going to have to put in parameters, delimiters, whatever you want to call them. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Sure. Nope. I always appreciate the questions. So that's our nav bar. As far as I know now, it all works. All right. So let's go down and let's create our next section. And our next section that's in here, it's going to have a little bit of text and it'll have my picture in there. And sorry, but I could use a different picture, but I just grabbed one of mine. All right. And we're going to put that one in there. So I'm going to put another comment in here. And this is going to say, this is called either the hero section. All right. And Traversy calls it the showcase section. So we're going to have the hero or showcase start. And then we will have the hero or showcase end. All right. So we're going to put that in right now. And again, I appreciated the question. I hope you'll keep asking. And I hope that anybody who's watching this, if you are watching it on tape, if something doesn't make sense, that you'll let me know. And again, one of the reasons today that we went over those PowerPoints was that and again, I think Mr. Smith is the one who created those. He did a great job of linking to the documentation. So if something was in there that you didn't get, on the bottom of the slide was a link to the associated documentation. All right. So we're going to put a bunch in here right now. This is going to be our about or our hero section. It's not going to be real big. All right. But let me just say one thing I want to do in here first. And again, I'm going to do this because otherwise this wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. But I'm going to go and grab where I've got a copy here. I've got this folder and it's got a bunch of junk in it that I'm going to end up using. So I want to grab both that images folder and I want to grab the copy of my resume. I'm just going to copy those right now and I'm going to paste them into our ePortfolio that we're working on right now. All right, because I'm not trying to surprise you or anything. And just so you know, what these will have is I might not even use all of them, but these are the ones I used originally in here. And of course, that's the picture of me. All right. So we're going to come in here and write the hero section right now. Now, it's kind of nice to partition this stuff off. We did use nav. All right, we did use nav in here. So we're being somewhat HTML5 compliant. We don't technically have a regular header. All right, so we don't have that, but I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create this as a section. Now, I'm going to put a bunch of stuff in here. Okay, first thing is I'm going to put in a ton of classes. And I want to put in first BG dark, text light. I want there to be padding all the way around it, padding 5. But if you're on a large screen, just to show you, we'll have no padding at all. So PD LG 0. That means that when we get up to 1220 or whatever it was or above, there'll be no padding. Just to show you how you can combine these different things in here. So we've got here padding 5, that's all the way around. If it's large, we want none, except if it is large. All right. Then what we want to do is we'll want some top padding. So PT for padding top, large 5. And there are a multitude of ways you can do this. I'm again basing mine off the way Traversy did it, but you can do this in a lot of different ways. All right, I'm going to say here, text center. All right. And text SM start. What the heck does that mean? All right, let me put the ID in here. So ID equals about. All right, so that's all that is in there. Now, let's break this down. That means this background will have the same color by default as our nav bar will have. Any text that we put in it should be lighter. It should automatically have 5, and I don't remember what those units are. I think they do talk about them in if you go out into the documentation. But we want as much Bootstrap added padding all the way around as we can have, and that'll be on everything up till a large. So for a large or an extra large, all right, and again, I believe that was like 1220 or above. Okay, for those, we want no padding, except we want there to be padding at the top so it's not bumping against the top of 5. All right. We want the text that's in here to be automatically centered. And what we want is if it's small, remember that small thing, then instead of this text being centered, left justified. All right. And you'll see it. It'll make more sense when we see it in action in just a moment. All right. Now, as we have been doing then, the first thing we're going to do is come in here. And now you're used to me doing stuff like this, coming in and saying div class equal container. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's the way I usually do it. But just so you know, if you didn't, Emmett has got a shortcut in here. I hit here and I hit tab. Emmett thinks you're working with a div. It's just a shortcut. Traversy, I've watched he's got an Emmett thing that's about a half an hour long with a bunch of shortcuts in it. There's all sorts of cheat sheets for shortcuts, but I'm just showing that to you just so you saw it. All right. So this will be my container. And again, everything that I'm doing inside of here of this section will be in this container. All right. So the first thing that I want to do inside of this container is I want to set up the way I want things to be. What does that mean? It's easier to show you. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to put in another div. And the class is going to be D, and it's going to say on a small screen, all right, that I want to use flex, which again, flex box, and I want to align the items to the center, all right, and I want to justify the content using between. This will make much more sense, I better spell it right, when we look at it all in just a moment, and we will in just a second. All right. So that's the start. Okay. And that's, again, like I said, that's another div. So I've got a section with a div in it, with a div in it. All right. Now, inside of this last div that we just put in, okay, now I'm going to put in basically the stuff that I want in here, which I'm going to put into, yes, another div. Just into a div. I'm not going to add any classes or anything else in there. So this is what we have in here thus far. And I'm going to put in an H1 tag. All right. And I want it to say something like, this is my e-portfolio. And that'll work just fine. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to take the words e-portfolio and make them a different color. Again, I'm basing this on what Traversy did. We don't have to do that. But just to show you, I can come in here. Remember that a div is designed to go across an entire line. A div is what's referred to as a block level element. Well, I only want these two words, or that word, hyphenated word, e-portfolio, to be a different color. So that's not a block level element. That's an inline level element. And whereas with block levels, I use divs, with inlines, I use a span. And I'm going to say here span class equals, and I'm going to use in here text warning. And that'll give you a little bit of a yellowish kind of color. Now I want to put this e-portfolio inside of the span. Right now it's outside, so I want to put it inside of the span. All right. Okay. Right now it's not going to look like much. But I've got that. So this is my e-portfolio, and that's the coloring that we just put in. Okay. And you can see the background color is the same color. I could have made it light. I could have made it primary, meaning it was blue. I could have made it secondary, meaning it was green, etc. I just kept it for now, at least. I kept it as the same color. All right. So after this H1 that's in here, thing that I want to do is I want to put in a paragraph. Now, you may remember this yesterday. I showed you something when we talked a little bit about using the Jumbotron, but you can use this anywhere. I want this paragraph to be a little bit big, not real big, but I want it to have a little bit different font. So I'm going to say class equals lead. And I want some padding up and down on there. Okay, so I'm going to say MY4. All right. Now, I haven't put anything in that paragraph yet. So if I go run this again, you're not going to see very much. All right. So I'm going to say here, hello and welcome to my ePortfolio. Again, you could put in here literally anything you wanted. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions. I'd love to hear from you. Oops, something like that. And again, as I keep saying, if you don't like that, you could put virtually anything in there you wanted. All right. So let's see. And after the paragraph, still inside of this div, all right, I'm going to put in a button. In fact, I'm going to do it like this. All right, now I'm going to start adding some stuff to this button. Put this on another line. Oops. That's what I wanted. Yes. Current resume .pdf. So that'll be the href. I want it to open up in a new tab. And I want the class of the button to be BTN, button primary. It'll be a blue. And it'll be large. Right? So that should be there, everything that I need. All right, so let's see. I've ended that. And I want this to be something like, see my resume. And I want that to be in it. Why is it doing this? Let's see. I needed that at the beginning. So that should be my ending A tag there, I believe. If I did it right, we'll see in a moment. All right. So let's see what that looks like. All right. Well, something's goofed up, as you can see, and we'll fix that in a minute. But we've got the hello and welcome. Please feel free and see my resume. Okay, that all looks good, but I've got a whole bunch of this stuff in here that is goofed up. So we're going to fix that right now. And it's because somehow that became a B instead of button. I think that's why. So let's look. That looks a little better. Now, it's not perfect. All right. Looks like I could use some padding or margin or something down here, but it's fine. It is getting there. Let's just put it that way. And it's, for lack of better words, it's kind of a it's basically it's just a thing that's in motion, or it's a living document. So let's go back in here. All right. And after this div, let's put in an image. Now we're going to say class equals img fluid W50. This wasn't working exactly the way I thought it would before, but D none. We're going to talk about all this again. D SM block. Okay. And then we're going to say in here source E. So that's the picture of me. And I'll say alt equals picture of Jeff Scott. All right. Now, with the luck I've been having today, it probably won't look the way I want it to, but let's see. That's actually the way I want it to look. All right. Now, I'm going to talk about everything we put in there, but before we do, I want to show you a couple things. I want to take this and I want to make it smaller. And what you're going to notice is when right now this text in here is left justified. Hopefully you can see that. All right. And when it reaches a certain point, it's still left justified, but the picture got to 50% of the size it was. That was that W50. As I keep going, all right, still going, still going. All right, now when it reaches that point, right there, two things happened. All right, first, the picture went away. And second, the text that's left, the text that's there is now centered. So let's take a quick look. Notice this is still working. All right. And before we do anything else, let's just go back and look at that particular text to see exactly what went on there. All right. So I want to take it from the top, which was right here. So this is our section. And believe it or not, we're pretty much done with this section. So let's just take it from the top. I already mentioned the text light, the P5, etc. So I don't really want to talk about that anymore. All right. The ID is about, and I got to work on that because what should be happening is when I click about up on my menu up above, it should be jumping down here, and it didn't appear to be doing that. I'll take a look at that later. But we've got now in here, we've got this container class. All right. Inside of here, what are we telling it we want it to do? Well, we're telling it to use Flexbox. We're telling it, and this content between doesn't appear to be working the way I thought it would be. All right, because I was hoping that there would be a little bit of margin, but those things are really pushed together right now. But what do we have in here? Well, we've got this div that starts here and it ends there. That's, for lack of better words, that's the first or the left half. That is the left half of my showcase section. And what it has in there is an H1 tag that says this is my ePortfolio. All right. And in that tag, the word ePortfolio, we gave a text warning, which means it turned it yellow. And again, that's exactly what Traversy did. We could have said text primary there to make it blue, text success there to make it green, etc. You get the idea. All right. Then we put in a paragraph and we used lead text just so that it would appear and it would look a little bit different. All right. And then we've got MY, which is top and bottom margin. All right. Of 4. Okay. That's that hello and welcome, etc. We love to hear from you. Then underneath that, we've got our button. All right. And our button right now, when you look at it, where is it? Well, there's the A, href equals. All right. You've seen this before. So it should be opening up my resume and it should be opening it up in a new window. And the class that we're associating, in fact, I think this is a little funky here. I'm going to grab this stuff, even though it worked. All right. even though what we just did worked, I'm going to put this up here because that is the button. So the class is BTN, BTN primary, BTN large, all right? And the stuff that's in here for this A tag, it should be see my resume, all right? And when we click on the see my resume, it should be opening up this. Now, it didn't appear to be. I don't know why, because I've done this before and it's open, but we'll look at it in a moment. And then we have our image in here. All right. Now, a couple things about what's in here. This says by default, all right, by default, display it as none. Don't display the image. However, when you get to a small screen size and above, display it block. And what block means is put it right to the right of that paragraph. All right. So again, what we're telling it to do here, and I played around with this. I don't like this W50. I think I probably would end up myself going in there. And if I'm going to make changes, all right, then I'm going to make those changes and I'm going to make those probably in my own CSS and not Bootstrap because it didn't work the way I had envisioned it working. All right. Now, when you look at this, then, all right, I've got right here, we put that margin in here. All right, above and below, that was that MY4 that we put in there. I'm wondering if I put in MX4, if that would move this over or if it would screw it up. I don't really know. So I'm going to give it a try. I mean, that's how we all learn this stuff. All right, so on the paragraph where we had the MY4, I'm going to try also to include an MX4. If it screws it up or if nothing happens, I'll just remove it right away. All right, and that did, as you can see, that gave me some space in here. All right, so it's looking a little bit more the way I want it to look. Now, if you don't like the fact that I use this color right here, and you say, well, no, it looks too much like this, you already know this. But again, we could come back and in here, where we've got our section in our class BG dark, we should be able to put in here background. I would think like success would work. So you can see how we can make massive changes in here and do them very easily. Now, you might not like that at all, but remember, the other thing we can do if we want to is I could use the success up here and I could make this green or I could make this blue and keep this dark. All right. And again, you know this already, that all I have to do is come back here and make this dark and then go up to where my nav bar is up here. All right. Up here where the class is nav bar, instead of making it BG dark, nav bar dark, I'm going to make it background. I don't know. Let's try success and see if it takes. How about primary? And we'll say nav bar. I think well, I'll say primary here too. That may not be what I want, but we'll see in a moment. If the text all goes the way it wasn't what I wanted. Okay. So I may want to go and change that color of all this stuff to white. All right. This is all just, for lack of better words, this is all being done on the fly. All right. So I'm going to say here, text light. Right. And I don't know what happened here. Let's see. Looks like I lost my double quote there. I don't know how, but I did. Well, and it isn't working. We'll fix that. I don't know what the problem is. But the see my resume isn't opening either. I'll try to get both those fixed by tomorrow. So I want that to be white. All right. But I want to do one more thing today. All right. And that is I want to quickly go in and look at cards. All right. Now, the other thing I may want to do with this image right here is I might want to put a margin bottom or padding bottom or whatever in there for that image. All right, so let's go back and look. And where we have the image right here. All right, I'm going to have, let's see if we put in margin bottom. Let's try a 3. I don't know if this will work or not work. All right, there is a little there. It's kind of hard to see, but it is there. Let's try to change it from a 3 to a 5. All right, now there's more down here. Now, again, if you don't like that, you could change that around any way you wanted to change that around, anyway. All right. But like I said, what I'd like to do, and give me the time, I'll go till about 10:15 or so, and then we'll just call it a period. But I'd like to get the next section done here. All right. And that's going to be the why me section. And then tomorrow when you come in, I will do the portfolio section, the contact section, and the footer section. So you'll have all that stuff. All right. So let's do our next section. And like I said, that'll be it for today. All right. So now I've ended my showcase. So I'm going to come in here again. And I'm going to say AWD1100 section start. And my AWD 1100 section end. All right, so that's what I want to put in here. Okay, and in here, I'm going to have cards, just so you know. I'm going to have cards in here. All right, so it'll be in a section again. All I'm going to put in here for this is class equals P5. And I want to give it that ID. And I want that ID to be equal to AWD 1100. All right. So that's going to be everything that's going to be in my section. Now, there is a little bit of typing in here. That's the bad news. The good news is I want to basically do the same thing in here 3 times. So I'm going to type in the first one, and then I'm going to copy it twice and just make some changes. So I should be able to finish this ideally in about 15 minutes or so. All right. And you've already seen this. We talked about working with this stuff already. The first thing I want to do is I'm going to say dot container. All right. And that's my div for my container. All right. Then I'm going to put an H2 tag in here. It's going to be equal to text center. And I'm going to give it a little bit of margin bottom too. So margin bottom 4. All right. And I'm going to put in there AWD 1100 web development technologies, which is the class we're currently in. And if I go in and do a file save on this and look at it, so that's what I've added right there. So I've got this section basically done. I want to fix that for tomorrow. And now I'm going to start and quickly do this section. All right. So after that H2 that we just put in there, okay, we want to start working with, all right. But what we want is we're going to want to basically have 4 different things, or I'm sorry, 3 different things, one for HTML, one for CSS, and one for JavaScript. We could have even added another one for Bootstrap, but this is just the way that I did it. All right. Again, when you get your assignment tomorrow, there'll be some stuff in there that'll be similar to this. There'll be some stuff in there that'll be different than this. All right. I'm doing this and I'm going to put it out there for you as a template. That said, I do not want to get every one of these tests turned in where they all look just like this one, except the content's different. All right. This is a chance for you to use some of your artistic prose, so to speak. All right. So I'm going to come in here and put in another div, and the class is going to be equal to row, and I want a text center, and I want a little gap between these of 4. All right. If you don't know what that means, again, just bear with me and you'll see it in just a moment. All right. Then inside of here, I want another div, and the class is going to be column because you have columns and rows. And I want to say column MD. If you don't know what that means, you will after I run this in a moment. All right. Then another div. In fact, I'm going to put a bunch more divs in here. Another div with a class that's equal to card. And I want the background to be secondary. If you don't know what that means, you'll see that in a moment. And I want the text to be light. All right. Then inside of that div, I want another div. Okay. This will be the card body. I don't know why I did that, but I did. All right, card body, text center, and then another div. And this won't make sense until you see it in action. But this is one of the cool things that you can do with this. All right, and I want to end that div. Then in here, I want an H3. Then I want a paragraph where I put in my text. Graphic and hyperlink effects. I think that was everything. Nope. Graphic and hyperlink effects on World Wide Web pages. Okay. Still not done, but almost now. After this, I want to come in here and I want to do let's see. All right. Let me see if this worked or if I screwed something up in my typing. That's good. We're going to make 3 of these. So this is going to go down in size in just a minute. All right. But this is what I'm creating. So this is my first card. Now, a couple things about this. First of all, this thing is actually would be really, really, really little. That's a picture of a laptop. And it would be very, very, very little. But what we did was we gave it a class of H1. You may or may not have noticed that. What does that mean? H1 is an H1 tag. So we told it to be the size of an H1 tag, which is kind of cool in my opinion, for whatever my there isn't worth. All right. This was our title right here, and this was our card text. Then we put this in. If we click on this, it goes to that particular HTML tutorial right in here. All right, so there's one of them is done. So I want to go back and right here where I've got my div class equal row text there, right there, where the column equals MD, that one right there. I want to go all the way down. And let's see, how far do I want to go down? I want to go down to, I guess, the one I'm at. And I'm going to copy that to the clipboard. And I'm going to paste it in again and hit enter. And I'm going to paste it in again. Now, if this worked, I'll now have this broken into thirds. All right. Well, it only put in 2 of them. I don't know. Oh, I guess I did a cut instead of a copy. So hopefully now it'll be in thirds. There it is. So there's my cards in here. Now I'm going to change the text that's in there, and I'm going to change the icon that's in there. So this has got HTML5. I'm going to make this CSS3, and I'm going to make this JavaScript, and I will change those 2 also. All right, you can see we've even got a hover effect that we get by default on our buttons. So let's change that, and then that'll be it for today. All right. So the first thing I want to do is, there was the first one, so that was the laptop, etc. Then we want to come here, and this second one here, the second one is person square. All right. This will be CSS3. And I want to change my paragraph. Let's see, that was a total of what? 3 lines. Okay. So on screen, paper, and other media. It controls page layout. This may be a little bit too big, but we'll fix it if we have to. All right. And then finally, the W3 schools. This should be, I believe, CSS. So let's see what that one now looks like. All right, so are now done. Let's fix the last one, which is for JavaScript. And this one will be people. And this will be JavaScript. And let's see. That'll be JS. All right. And this will change as well. All right. So we now have all three of these. Does this open up the CSS thing in a new window? Yes, it does. Does this open up the JavaScript one in a new window? And yes, it does. In addition, when I go and collapse this down, notice how this is now stacking. All right. In fact, everything appears to be stacking. Again, I've got to fix that color. I'll do that for tomorrow morning. So what we will do tomorrow is, again, this why me is going to be put in down here as an accordion. All right. And it'll have some information about why you should hire me. All right. After we put that in, I'll put in the actual portfolio where we will again use cards, maybe 3, maybe 4, I don't know. And that'll be down below the accordion. All right. And then after that, we'll put in our contact information. And after our contact, that'll be a simple form. And then after that, we will add our footer. All right. And try to make it so that we can jump to the different things that are in here. Now, just so you see it, because I'm not trying to put anything over on you, I'm going to grab what I've done so far, do a file, save. All right. And this is called ePortfolio. So my git bash. I'm going to say part 1. I don't like saying it like that, but I'm going to do it anyway. All right. Then finally, I'm going to go out to GitHub. Hopefully, I don't have a repo named ePortfolio. All right. Make it public. And I will send you the link to it, but there it is. And this will be the link to it. You will get this in the email that you'll get in just a few minutes. But that's it right there. All right. So like I said, you saw what we did today. Tomorrow I'll finish this up. I will have the test thing ready for you, and I'll give you that tomorrow as well. All right. And then Thursday and Friday will both end up being lab for the entire period. All right. Any questions?
Not right now. Thank you.
Okay. Sounds good. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.